Welcome to Edupedia World Grade 10 Computer Science Video Lecture Series. I'm Upeka Vandibona, and from this episode we are talking about the primitive variables of C++. In this episode, we introduces the basics of storing and using data in a program. After establishing the fundamental notions of objects, types, values, and variables, we introduce several operators and give many examples for variables of types char, int, double, and string. From the previous episode, we wrote our first C++ program, the Hello World. It just only writes to the screen, so it produces an output. It does not read anything, it does not get the input from the user, so it's rather a boring work. Real programs tend to produce results based on some input we give them, rather than just doing exactly the same thing each time we execute them. To read something, we need somewhere in the computer's memory to place what we have read. We call that place an object. An object is a region of memory with a type that specifies what kind of information can be placed in it. A named object is called a variable. For example, character string are put into string variables and integers are put into int variables. You can think of an object as a box into which you can put a value of the object's type. So here we have a string type variable. We termed it as first name. In this box, we can put our first name. Now let's try to write a program for this. Here you know what is meant by the hash include line and using namespace line as well as the function main. We are going to discuss what's inside in this function main, the function body. The first line in the function body is a cout. That means what's inside in this double quotation will be output in the console. It says, please enter your first name followed by enter. The /n, the \n represent the cursor will goes into the next line. This type of a message is typically called a prompt because it prompts the user to take an action. Now the second line defines a variable of type string called first name. This sets aside an area of memory for holding a string of characters. Now the third line, say in, it refers to the standard input stream defined in the standard library character input. It reads characters from the input, the keyboard, into the variable. Now take a look at the output operator of the cout and the input operator of the say in. For the cout we use lesser than marks. For the say in we use greater than marks. Now the second operand of the input operator, we also called it as getFrom operator. It specifies where that input goes. So if we type some first name, say Nicholas, followed by a new line, the string Nicholas becomes the value of the first name. The new line is necessary to get the machine's attention. Until a new line is entered, that means hitting the enter key, the computer simply collects characters. That delay gives you the chance to change your mind, erase some characters and replace them with others before hitting the enter. The new line will not be part of the string stored in the memory. Good. Now the fourth line, cout. It prints hello followed by the value of the first name, that means Nicholas, followed by a new line on the screen. So if we had like repetition and extra typing, we could have written this last line into 3 separate output statements, like as shown in here. First line for the hello, second line for the value of the first name, and the third line for the \n. As we have to avoid repetitions, we can combine these 3 output operations into a single statement as used in here. Now note that the way we use quotes around the characters in hello but not in first name. That is because we use quotes when we want a literal string. When we don't quote, we refer to the value of something with a name. I'll explain this through the NetBeans environment. Okay, now here is our program. The hash include line using namespace line, the main function, and this is the function body. The first line we have the prompt message, please enter your first name followed by enter, the string type variable first name, and the cin and the cout of the captured first name. Now let's try to run this program. Please enter your first name. So here I'm going to type my name, and there I'm going to hit the enter key. You can see it output hello Upeka. That's what the first name have captured, the string. Okay, now the double quotations problem. Here I'm going to change this cout line. Rather than having the hello, here I'm going to write the variable name, the first name, inside the double quotations. Now in here we have the first name inside the double quotation, in here without the double quotation. Now let's try to save this and run. Please enter your first name followed by the enter. I press the enter key. Now this was the part in the double quotations, so it taken it as a string literal. And this part represents the value of the variable, the first name. So with that you can understand whatever in the double quotations it take as a string literal. I have already told you to access an object we need a name. A named object is called a variable and it has a specific type, for example int or string, and that determines what can be put into the object and which operations can be applied. For example, we can multiply ints using multiplication operator, but we cannot multiply strings. The data items we put into variables are called values. A statement that defines a variable called a definition, and a definition can provide an initial value. Now if you want to write a definition statement with the initial values, you can write it like this: int age equals to 42 and a semicolon, string name equals to, within the double quotations, Anna Marie, and at the end the semicolon. Now if you wrote something like this, string name equals 39, as you didn't use the double quotations in here, it will taken this as a int literal. As the variable is a string variable, there would be an error because you can't put a int literal into a string variable. The compiler remembers the type of each variable and makes sure that you use it according to its type as specified in its definition. Actually, C++ provides a rather large number of types. However, you can write perfectly good programs using only 5 of those. Let's see what are they. So here we have listed out int, double, char, string and bool. Int for the integers, double for the floating point numbers, char for the individual characters, string for the character strings, and bool for the logical variables. Now remember, for the char variables you can have only one individual character and it should be enclosed with single quotes. Now for the bool type variables, it can have only true or false without quotations. Now here I want to mention one additional thing. The input operation CIN is sensitive to type. That means it reads according to the type of variable you read into. For example, take a look at this program. The first line is the prompt message cout, and the second line defines the string type variable first name. The third line defines int type variable age. The fourth line is a cin, it captures the first name. The fifth line is also a cin, it captures the age. The last line outputs all the things that had captured. Now let's try to run this through the NetBeans. Now here is our program. Now I'm going to run this. If we type in Peter 22, then the input operator will read the Peter into the first name and the 22 into the age. Let's see by typing the enter key. Yes, it captures like this. First name is the Peter and the age is 22. Now why won't it read Peter 22, both of them, into the first name? That is because, by convention, reading of strings is terminated by what is called white spaces. That means spaces, new lines, and tab characters. Otherwise, white space by default is ignored by the input operator. For example, you can add as many as you like before a number to be read. The input operator will just skip past them and read the number. Now, what would happen if we type 22 Peter, the number first and the name second? Let's see what would happen. And here I am typing 22 Peter and the enter key. Now in here you can see the number 22 is captured as the first name, because after all 22 is a sequence of characters. On the other hand, Peter isn't an integer, so it was not read. The output is 22 followed by 0 because you didn't give age an initial value and you didn't succeed in reading a value into it. Therefore, you get some garbage value that happened to be in that part of memory when you started executing. A string read using the input operator is by default terminated by white spaces. That means it reads a single word. But sometimes we want to read more than just a one single word. There are of course many ways of doing this. For example, we can read a name consisting of two words like this. Take a look at the cin statement. There we have used two string variables, first and the second, and we simply used input operator twice, once for each name. When we want to write the names to output, we must insert a space between them. So that's in the cout statement. Let's try to implement this in the NetBeans environment. Now here is our program. We got two string variables, first and the second. In the cin statement, we capture two strings and assign them into the first variable as well as the second variable. In the last line, we output the values of the first variable as well as the second variable, and between them we have a white space to keep a space between the two values. Now let's try to run this. Now I am going to type two words in here and press enter. You can see the values of the two variables now outputting in here. And with that we are going to end up this episode. So from this episode we basically talked about variable definition and initialization. From the next episode we are talking about how to use operators with the variables. So thank you for watching and stay tuned on with Edupedia World.